Hey guys, Nick here. Welcome back to another episode of the Physiology Secrets podcast. Bit of a different episode today. Jumped on a Zoom call with one of our METS membership clients, Brent. Talked through a few of his questions that he's had over the last little while in regards to his training, particularly in and around the whole isolation situation. So check out this episode. Some really valuable stuff in there in and around Zone 2 training in particular, what we should be doing, mixing up some of these VO2 intervals, etc. So if you're interested in jumping on and having a bit of a call with us as well, let us know. We'll be taking some consults over the next little while, and we still are available for a chat if you do want to talk anything about performance, sports science, how your training is going to change over the next little while. Anything we can help with, more than happy to. So get in contact with us, probably by email. nick@metsperformance.com is the easiest way to reach me to get in contact and lock in your session. And if you want to have yourself feature on the podcast as well in one of these episodes, feel free to let us know, and we'd love to have you on. So hopefully some of these questions are some of the questions that you might have as well, and you never know who else is also thinking the same thing, but might be just waiting for someone else to ask it. So jump on, have a listen to this one. Really good episode, and we look forward to doing a few more of these. So I'm going to cut to our chat with Brent, and we'll take it from there.
Go for it, mate. What can we help with? How you been? And
yeah, not bad, mate. ISO life's a bit
bit
bit of a
different.
funny one. I think the worst fever I've had's probably been cabin fever so far. So how about yourself?
Yeah, pretty similar. Just getting the bike and all that set up in the lounge rooms a bit sort of different, and it's just sort of been a bit weird, hasn't it? Just like completely out of routine and working from home, and as much as I do a bit of work from home, but like not being at the office and the testing and all that's a bit sort of different. But it's one of those things. It's only going to get worse for the next couple of months from the sounds of things as well. Just like locking down even further. I think a few fines being handed out at the moment.
Yeah. We were just told that the kids are doing term 2 at home.
Yeah, okay. That's definite.
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
Yep. So that's going to be a challenge. I think it'll be. My wife and I'll have to figure out creatively how we cover that, especially on the days where we're both working. So won't be fun. But thanks for doing this. I actually reckon I was thinking about it. I was like, how do we keep it going? Because I think we've sort of started working together, and it's actually working really well. And I just wanted to sort of pick your brain on how do I sort of keep progressively overloading and just some ideas on different sessions. So I've made some notes, and I might just sort of roll through those, and we'll see how we go. But we'll start with sort of the VO2 sessions. So I've been following your advice, doing the like 2 to 4 minute efforts at 95% of maximum aerobic power. I've found my power output is going up. So I probably started around 370. I'm now sort of hitting like 400 watt efforts for 2 minutes. And I've pushed that out to, I can do 9 of them. I think that's the most I've done.
Yep.
So once I max out sort of at that 20-minute range, how do we keep overloading that? So for example, if I'm doing 10 by 2, 2 on, 2 off, so 2 on at 400 or whatever it is, and then 2 minutes off, sort of just float, would I get more aerobic power value out of extending the interval time, i.e. making it like a 2.5 minute interval with the same rest, or a 3 minute interval and accumulating that amount of time? So I'm sort of going a bit deeper, going into a darker place for longer, or would I be better keeping the interval length the same and actually trying to push more power?
Yeah, so there's a couple of ways you can sort of work through it. I guess the one that we often sort of look at is going, all right, once we're getting to sort of 20 minutes of working time, it's pretty clear that you've adapted, because there's no way that you're going to get to 20 minutes of working time at 95% of VO2 max straight out the gate. So it's like once we get to that point, you're doing 6 by 3 minute efforts at 18 minutes, or 7 by 3 at 21 minutes, whatever it is. You have to have had some sort of adaptation. So then we look at, all right, is it a case of VO2 max is now higher? So the original wattage, like I'm just going to throw out random numbers. Instead of writing at 380, you're writing at 400 now. Well, if your original VO2 max was 400 and 380 was your 95 without doing the math, obviously means that if you can ride at 400 for 20 minutes worth of effort, your VO2 max is not at 400. It's above that. So it all then shifts up. So then we go, all right, if you're able to ride at 400 watts for 20 minutes, maybe we need to lift the wattage a bit. That's the first place we can look.
Yeah.
The only thing we have to be cautious with, though, is are we actually then going to see a further benefit? So practically some athletes we do. So I'll give you the case of like in the example of someone whose VO2 max might be at, they're pretty new to, say, triathlon or cycling. The VO2 max is at 270 watts to begin with. 95% of that's about 255. In the space of 6 to 8 weeks, we might be able to get them to sort of 280, 285 watts in their efforts and then be able to do another block. Because there's still scope to move. They might be able to get that VO2 max power from 270 up to 330 in the space of a sort of I guess a 15, 20 week cycle. Depending on their adaptation rate and things like that. But it's the type of thing that we might be able to continue to boost that wattage, in which case we would drop the length of the interval back down and just start again, essentially. So that's the first option. Instead of doing 20 minutes of work, we come back down, maybe do 14, 15 minutes of work, or even lower. You could drop it right back down to 12. Don't necessarily have to go back down to 6 by 2 minute efforts the entire time. You can go back down and do like a pyramid session, or you can go back down and do 4 by 3 minute efforts, but lift the intensity. So you're not having to do as much work, but the intensity has gone up. So that's one way we can do it. The only reason I say maybe for someone like you, a different type of training might be a bit more beneficial as a sort of a short-term block to then get back into that, is because it's a case of, well, are we then, for someone who's a lot higher trains, we're now talking sort of high 300s, low 400 watts, how much further can we go to be able to allow you to jump up enough?
Yeah.
I would probably then start thinking about is, all right, let's do a shorter block of maybe some shorter based efforts. So really go well and truly above maximal intensity. So what I mean by that is like 110% of VO2 max. So if we're thinking you can hit 400 for your 95% roughly, let's say it's probably close to, guessing wise, you're probably close to 430, 440 watts maybe for 110%.
Yeah.
Hitting that 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off. So it'd be 30 for 30 seconds, 30 seconds off, 10 times, 3 minute recovery, and then go again. So what it does is it pushes you way above that 95% just to give you a different stimulus. And the main reason is it's not necessarily doing anything differently from an overall. If we look at the very broad macro adaptations, mitochondria changes are the same in both of those types of sessions, 2 to 4 minutes on or 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off. We get all the same cardiovascular responses, all the same VO2 responses. It's just a different session that's going to push that wattage even higher to give you a different stimulus, because the body's at a point where it needs something different. But also from a psychology perspective, the monotony of doing 2 minutes on, 2 minutes off, or 2 to 4 minutes in length again and again and again and again, particularly in a period that we are now where it's like, well, if we're eventually taking away your ability to go out riding on the road and you're stuck on the trainer a lot, doing the same session week in, week out, some guys are going to be able to do it. I personally wouldn't be able to do it, and a lot of athletes personally won't, because it's just the same. So this is going to give you a bit of a different stimulus to get a similar effect, but what we should see is a bit more of a continual progression, because it's just giving you that. There is a bit of variation in there. What we typically find is the higher the train you are, the more variation you need to get those fine-tuned benefits at the top.
Yeah. It's funny you say that. I did a group meet-up ride with the guys I ride with this morning, and the 30-minute block where we went hard was sort of very much like those micro intervals, that 30-30. So the on efforts were probably 420 to 450 watts for about 30 seconds to roll to the front, and then I'd sort of float at about 300 until my heart rate recovered a little bit, and then I just, as soon as my heart rate went below about 160, I'd just go again, and I sort of kept sort of propping that heart rate up to about 170, 175, and then letting it recover. And the way I was sort of thinking about it was, I'm accumulating time at VO2. It's probably not that specific, but that type of session, that repeated grilling where I'm sort of maxing out my heart rate, I figured that there'd be some sort of VO2 benefit.
Yeah, and that's what we get from those 10 on the 10 by 30 on, 30 off is when we talk about like the 2 to 4 minute efforts to start with the 1-to-1 work to rest. We always talk about the first 30 seconds or 45 seconds of that first 2 minute effort, for example. Your heart rate and things are going to come up in the session, so everything's catching up. But it's that golden minute and a half at the back end of the interval where you're at 95%, and even some of your responses are going above that. So we get to that VO2 time. To be able to get to that perfect VO2 time, we need 95% of max to be able to do it, because then it's sustainable across multiple efforts. If we lift the intensity, well, we're going to get there. It's going to take us a bit to get there because we have to go from here to there as opposed to not as far. But it's the type of thing that once we get up there, we're not up there for a very long period of time, but because we've pushed the intensity so much higher, the body's having to respond to a higher level, so that we recover a little bit, give it a 30-second recovery 1-to-1, we get back into the interval and we haven't actually dropped off as far. So we can get back to that VO2 point each time still. So it's just manipulating how we're getting up there. Probably the thing I would
if I'm doing if I'm doing that sort of bunch ride, it's pretty much roll as much as I physically can sort of thing. Like literally just keep pushing my heart rate up as high as I can handle, and let myself recover enough so my legs can take it.
Yes, ideally I'd stay with the 1-to-1, so 30 on, 30 off. And the thing I probably would tweak is, and it's difficult if you're doing it in a group situation, but if you can get everyone on the same sort of page, and you might actually find you can do it anyway if you're sitting on wheels and things like that, probably closer to about 50% VO2 max wattage for your recovery block. So that'd be something like 430 on and then 215 off as an example.
Which would be okay to
close enough to. Which would be fine. I mean, pretty much in a group situation, you think about how long it would take you to roll off the front, drop to the back, and then hook back on. You've probably only got maybe 15, 20 seconds actually having to hold the wheel, and then you're on again. If you actually rotate turns, bang on 30 seconds. It is obviously easier to do if you're on a trainer. It's easier to do to nail those wattages. But if you're getting it close enough on the road, it's still going to be good. We just want to.
This was on the.
We just want to avoid dropping.
Trainer.
We just want to avoid dropping even further. So, I wouldn't be trying to drop down to 90 watts. Like in a 2 to 4 minute on, because you got the longer recovery. We want to drop the wattage a fair way down. Like for you, it's going to be like high hundreds, low 200s anyway. But it's the type of thing we don't really want to be getting less than sort of 50% VO2 max, because we need to keep the oxygen consumption coming in partially out, if that makes sense. So we can get back up to that VO2 level each time, as opposed to having to really struggle in the back end of the session. It's like, all right, I have to punch 480 watts to get my heart rate back up because I took almost too much recovery.
Gotcha.
Trying to minimise the drop off.
That's also good. I mean, the other thing it does too is it makes this sort of training a bit more social as well. Because I think if you're going, I'm doing my 2-on-2 offs and I'm doing this protocol, and then you end up riding on your own all the time. So, I mean, if I can achieve that through that sort of micro interval stuff and mix it up and, but the objective of the session is get that heart rate up, push big numbers, and really sort of nail myself as much as I can in that sort of 20, I mean, it's going to be 30 minutes, but let's call it 15 minutes of accumulated effort at VO2, then that's sort of stimulating the right.
Yeah, well, the actual effort time is only going to be about 10 minutes. If you do 10 by 30 on, 30 off, 3 minute break and then go again, you're only getting 10 minutes of actual effort. You get 5 minutes in each. 5 minutes in each block. So that's where you can really afford to just hammer yourself in those on periods if you are following it dead structured. I mean, you can adjust a bit if you want to do like one of them's a 45-second effort, and then you might do 45, 30, 15, as long as each of those have got 1-to-1 work to rest. And as you go down in time, you go up in wattage. So it's relative. Does that make sense? So 30 on, 30 off, 110%. 15 on, 15 off might be 120%. 45 on, 45 off might be 105, and then 60 on, 60 off might be 100% VO2 max.
Interesting you say that. I think the fittest I've been, I think the highest I got my FTP tested last year, I did it, was I was doing 20 by 1 minute on, 1 minute off, and the 1 minute on was at about 130% of FTP. So what's that? That's about 110% of VO2, and it was disgusting. I felt like I was going to vomit, but it
what
was
your
so
FTP
effective.
at the time? What was your FTP at the time?
345.
Yeah, VO2 would have been 100. Probably would have been 110, 120% for 450-ish watts.
Yeah, that's what I was pushing, and it was maybe 430, but it was by about the 15th rep. I remember just needing a bucket. It was they were horrible. I don't know why I stopped doing it though, because I had in my head that it wasn't good for time trialing, but clearly it is.
Yeah, it's perfect. So that top end of the engine, but probably in a session like that, like you get to 15. I can understand why you're absolutely cooked by 15. Probably just break it up, and that's the thing. It's we have to then balance. It's all very well hammering yourself in the session, but then we have to balance. All right, what is the objective of the session? It's to try and get this aerobic benefit to stimulate mitochondria, where we need the recovery to be able to do that. So to be able to get that, it might be a case of instead of doing 21 minute on, 1 minute off just straight away, you're going to do 10, have a block of 3 to 5 minutes rest, and then do 10 again. There's no harm in splitting it up. It's not going to be better or worse if you do it in one set or two sets with a break in the middle. You're still getting the same accumulated time. If anything, with a break in the middle, you're going to have more opportunity to stay bang on your wattage that you need because you're fresher, you're keeping the quality up. You can hit 430 watts every single time as opposed to, all right, intervals 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20 at 425, 420, 415 because you're just cooking yourself as you go. That's where, give yourself the allowance in the middle to have that recovery. Recovery is not a bad thing in that type of session. If we were trying to hit like 10-minute efforts where you're doing like more FTP stuff, 105% of FTP, then the short recovery is okay. And just going back to back is all right. But it's the type of thing that if we're going right up near VO2 max, we need that. We need a bit of recovery in the middle, and you can space it out because you're going to get there regardless. Because we're not trying to look at, all right, how much can you just tolerate in this session? We're trying to accumulate time at VO2 max to create this aerobic adaptation and move it in another direction. So feel free to give yourself a bit of recovery.
It's more self flagellation, a bit of punishment. So that's awesome. That sort of answers the questions around, I suppose, variety within that VO2 as well. So that's awesome. So the other thing that I've been working on is I've really just been doing like my VO2 work and my aerobic capacity stuff and nothing in the middle. So just with just to understand the benefits with aerobic capacity, is there a greater magnitude of fitness stimulus or gain from working closer up near that VT1 border, or is it all sort of relatively the same no matter, if it's so my VT1, I think riding wise is about 140 beats a minute and running was about 150. So that would equate to sort of my cycling my Ironman pace, and running would be my marathon pace. So I suppose the question is there benefit in me sort of in general preparation having sessions that are sort of right up near that border, or is there no additional benefit from that?
It's an interesting one. It's the type of thing that in a zone 2 session, you can technically get away with doing anything within that zone 2. So when we prescribe training zones, we look at the spectrum of, all right, 56% and less your VO2 max is active recovery, so that's your zone 1. Your zone 2 being up to that VT2 point, VT1 point that you're talking about. So that 2.5 millimoles of lactate, etc. Anything in that band, you could theoretically go out and do let's say you're running, zone 2 run, and get an aerobic stimulus out of it. As long as you were within that band of heart rate, based on your run heart rate or your bike heart rate. And we're at least 20 minutes in length. They're really the only two minimums that you need to be hitting. Anything in there is going to provide a stimulus. It's just a different stimulus depending where you go. Obviously, running at the top end of that, if you're pushing the limit, like if you're sitting on we're just on the bike 140. If we're sitting on 138 beats, 139 the entire ride, it's going to be a lot more challenging than sitting at 115 beats. Same for the run. Everything just shifts up. So we then have to consider, all right, what's the point of going out and doing the session? What are we trying to achieve here? If where I generally get most to sit for a typical general preparation sort of phase, if you like, is I get most to sit, take off sort of 5-7 beats off the top end of your zone 2 and sit somewhere around there as your average for the session is going to be a pretty good starting point. Where we can be a bit more specific is then when we're racing, we can then start to think about, all right, what is the direct demand for the race that we're heading into? In the case of Ironman, we then look at it and go, all right, what specific pace do we want to be sitting on? If we've got an athlete who's 4 minute K pace is their top end of their zone 2, but in the Ironman they know they're going to be sitting on 4:15, 4:20 instead in a bit more middle of zone 2. Absolutely, we're going to go and train that speed because we want to be as almost battle hardened as we can at that 4:20. Just be nailing that pace. On the flip side, though, if we're a consistent 4:30 runner and we want to move up to 4:15 pace, but it still all fits within our zone 2, we're adding in some time up at that 4:15 as long as it's staying heart rate wise okay and ticking the boxes. That's going to be beneficial, spending time there. In which case, you might then start to consider maybe some, I guess you could almost call them like a zone 2 build run if you want, where I might do 10 minutes at sort of low zone 2, 10 minutes middle of zone 2, and then 5 minutes at the top of zone 2 just to challenge myself and progress that to 10, 10 and 10, just rotating cycle. And then you might start to work up to 15 minutes at the top of zone 2, 20 minutes, etc. Repeat those blocks of three or four times in your run to accumulate your hour and a half, 2 hours, etc., however long you need. It's going to give you then more and more time at the top. Is it the same stimulus and the same overall adaptations? Yes, but has it challenged your body a little bit more to just go a little bit harder? Yes, also. Yeah. Does that make sense? So there's no, when I say there's no, from a theoretical perspective, in terms of what adaptations should we see, there's no difference. From are you going to be able to tolerate the pace better and are you going to learn the pace better? Absolutely. It's the same with VO2 intervals. Why do we go way at the top end of the spectrum? Well, it's going to teach you to ride it, like we just said, 430 watts. That makes 360 watts a hell of a lot easier. It makes 330 a lot easier. Same from a zone 2 perspective. We run at the top, and you don't want to be doing it all the time. Like it's really easy temptation to go, all right, I'm just going to sit bang on the top of my zone 2 every run, every ride.
Yeah. I think you get injured if you did that though.
You cook yourself, because you have to then be careful of, all right, if I go out for an hour and a half at the top end, if I actually need to do 2 hours of riding and I get an hour 45 in and go, oh, heart rate's starting to drift, it ends up becoming 15, 20 minutes of tempo at the end of your ride. And now we're getting a different stimulus there again. So that's where the fatigue will start to come in mostly. Particularly though, if you're not used to running or riding at that pace at top end, you just got to build it progressively as well. So I guess overall, at the moment, I'd be just going, what basically keep a bit of variety in, add some upper, add some lower, middle, zone 2, but I wouldn't be so strict on it at the moment, given that there's no immediate racing. If we were talking you're racing in 4 weeks, well, you want to be hitting as close to target pace if you like, but close to that upper end of zone 2. Given that you've got the time, I'd be saying let's go more that sort of middle. There's no real reason to overcook yourself from a volume perspective. We actually did a podcast on it the other week where we were talking about like periodization around lockdowns and things like that. And it's really the key part is going to be maintaining your high intensity stuff and then just ticking along the aerobic capacity stuff in the background, the zone 2 stuff as you need. Don't necessarily need to do big Ks or anything because one, we're not going to be able to get out and do it. Sitting on a trainer for 3 hours is going to be a pain. But then it's the type of thing that as long as you maintain that and do hour and a half, you do your bits and pieces here and there. If you've kept the intensity in, when you get back into full training mode, you can go and do whatever you need to do, and races are coming back. That building the volume is going to happen a little bit more progressively and a little bit faster progressively than if you were just to hammer the volume now, cook yourself, have to take a bit of a dip off and then get back into it. You may as well just, all right, let's just back the volume off, keep the intensity up there, maintain as much adaptation as you can from a long slow by doing something, because when we start to build the volume back, when we're able to go out and ride, do those big rides, etc. And it's also going to be more specific in the progression to a race where we know where we have to be ready for it, as opposed to now it's like, well, Busso's still on at the end of the year at this stage, but who knows later in the middle of the
Hopefully
year if anything's going to race. You know what I mean? So I sort of look at it from the perspective of you can mix it up a bit. What's then specific for racing? But if we don't have racing, then it's a case of doing anything in that zone 2 is still going to be beneficial. I'd still use all ends of the spectrum in that zone 2. Use it to your advantage.
Yeah.
Because the only way you can move it up is by sitting at that top end. It's the only way you can sort of nudge it.
Yeah, which is what I was keen to do. Sort of my long, easy run where I sort of sit on about 130 heart rate. I'm sort of ticking along around 420 at the moment.
Yep.
What I was thinking was if I had one run, like a shorter aerobic capacity run, maybe like a 10K once a week, where I actually sort of push that border, then I'd be able to sort of over time just sort of shave a few seconds off that easy pace and sort of get that down to maybe 4:15-ish.
Yeah,
so
and that's all it is. It's just shaving those couple of seconds off per K. It's not going to be the big chunks of time, but it's going to be the type of thing that, I mean, if you're more comfortable now, even like if 4:15 pace still is a zone 2 run, but it's 135 beats as opposed to 130 beats, it's still going to be more challenging, but it's still giving you an aerobic adaptation. You kind of win in all areas. Start with something like, just go out and do 40 minutes of 135 as opposed to going out and doing an hour and a half of 130 to start with. And it doesn't have to be a lot because it is going to be a bit of a shift. Like anything, the first time you do VO2 intervals, you're just like, what the hell are these? These are killing me.
Yeah.
And then you get better at them, and now you're like, oh, I can push a bucket load more power, so I have to do something different. Same thing with zone 2. You got to find that little bit, but we can't just go hour and a half at 135 because you blow yourself up about an hour in.
It's probably not it's not the heart and lungs that are the problem. It's your legs.
Yep.
Pretty much, you know, so my thinking was is actually teaching the other component really. It's probably the muscular endurance at that workload. And that's sort of where I also had in mind that kind of that zone 2 border on the bike where you're kind of not drilling, but you're kind of holding, well, for me, that's sort of around 270, maybe 280 at the moment. Will sit me on that border, and then just teaching myself, doing it one session a week, but just sort of teaching the body that this will be all day pace. By December. Yeah,
pretty much. And that's, like I said, if we're looking at December being the main goal, we've got time. So there's no real reason to be sort of rushing that. Like, progress it as slow as you need, because the last thing you want is overcook it for too long, do too much of pushing the limit, and by June your body's wrecked. And there's not much we can do because there's not much we can do at the moment anyway. But it's the type of thing. It's like then you go, right, probably have to have June, July pretty much off to get myself back right. And now we've got 3 months to a race day, and we've lost a lot of adaptation because we've actually gone backwards. So that's just what you want to avoid. So you just got to be careful about the volume. But it's the type of thing. I would start adding a bit of it in.
The last one. Thanks for that. That's good. It's sort of I think I've had a lot of time to think about it. Being in,
sitting at home, got nothing else to think about. Yeah.
Exactly. The other thing I started to sort of think about was, so when I'm doing specific prep, if I'm doing, say, a specific prep for like a 10K or a half Ironman or a marathon, and you're kind of dialing in that race pace. So I'd look at those and think, well, all those paces are essentially different thresholds that they're work outputs I can hold for a certain amount of time. In training, so we talk about sort of accumulating up to 20 minutes for our VO2, right? As a what do we do for a sorry, I'm just going to plug in losing power. What do we do for like say like a half marathon? So I've heard some, the old school coaches sort of saying 2/3 of the distance at race pace. but you sort of split that up. You might split that up into 3 or 4 different intervals.
Yep.
That would be your sort of your peak type of session. So for a half marathon, it might look like sort of accumulating 12 or 13 kilometers over the course of a few intervals. Maybe might be 3 4K efforts or 4 3K efforts or something like that at race pace with a really short rest. As like you sort of that, you're building up to being able to do, I don't know, something like if you did 3 4, say for a half marathon, like 3 4K efforts with a short float, might be a 3 or 4 minute float at half marathon pace, or for a marathon something like 4 6K efforts at marathon pace with 1K sort of float between. What as the peak session? What are your sort of thoughts around that type of work?
It's an interesting one. So I mean, there probably is a bit of merit in working that way. It's not the way I personally program or work, because I don't necessarily come from that sort of, I guess, traditional run coaching background. Like if you look at what some of those more old school coaches are doing, like they're still producing some decent results. So there is a bit of merit in it. When you look at the session from an overall perspective, though, it's achieving the same adaptation as what we would be trying to achieve anyway. Is that it's race-like or race-specific intensity, minimum recovery or shorter recovery, and then we're back into it, and you're teaching the body just to tolerate. It's bit of fatigue in, partially out, bit of fatigue in again, partially out. So you, in a race circumstance, it's just fatigue in, sits there, ideally just sort of flat lines, and it's not accumulating. Yes, you will get more and more fatigue towards the end, but it's the type of thing that we want to sort of slow that accumulation if we can. So really, like when I say there's no right or wrong, there's no like definitive rule of you must complete, and that's probably where I don't like the 2/3 sort of metric. It's like you must complete 2/3 of your race distance at your race speed in bunches of intervals. It's like, well, you may not necessarily have to, depending on what else you've done and where you're at. If I've got an athlete who's really, really good at tolerating fatigue, but their VO2 stuff isn't great, we're probably going to push a little bit higher than their sort of threshold, do some shorter based efforts to get the workload up because they can tolerate it, but try and get a bit of a mix of the VO2 stuff and actually maybe do that a bit longer. And then we may not have a chance at the back end of the program to build some of that 2/3 time anyway, because we just don't have enough weeks in the program. But the fact that they did more VO2 stuff is going to be more specific to them because we've actually changed the size of their engine. They're trying to squeeze 7 cylinders into a V6 engine as it is, because they're really, really, really well tuned at tolerating. They're really, really good at the race specific stuff. But they're trapped because they can't go any faster. And that's the issue. We take the handbrake off by giving them VO2 and it changes it. On the flip side, we give someone who's got really good VO2, they're going to need more time at the tolerance aspect, because it's just looking at strengths and weaknesses. So then we go, all right, maybe instead of spending 8 weeks pre-race doing the race-specific stuff, we might do a block of 12, which might give us time to work up, like I said, maybe closer to that 2/3. I don't specifically calculate that. I just look at it and go, all right, we just need to accumulate a little bit more time working at race-like intensity. One way we sort of work around it from I guess, fitting those types of sessions in as well, is it's the type of thing you wouldn't really want to be doing it week in, week out. Like I wouldn't necessarily be recommending each week we have some sort of run that is accumulating up to that 2/3 time if you were to follow that. Something that we do quite often for marathon, half marathon, or even sort of Ironman 70.3 as well, is have a run maybe every second week, as opposed to instead of going out and doing a 3-hour zone 2 run on a Saturday, you might go out and do hour 45, but you've got a 20-minute, a 15-minute, and a 10-minute sort of threshold, just sub-threshold effort in there, which is going to be that sort of tolerance aspect. It's going to give you hour 45 worth of work. That's going to be a hard session. You think about 20 minutes sitting basically just under threshold, sort of almost a tempo, borderline sub-threshold, if you want to call it, sort of intensity, 20 minutes on, 10 minutes off, and then you're straight into a 15-minute effort at ideally a slightly quicker pace, 7.5 minutes off, and then 10 minutes on, 5 minutes off. You're not going to be able to tolerate much more than that anyway.
Yeah.
Because when we scale it back for our, let's say probably marathon's a better example, majority of people other than the elites, if we put them aside, majority of people are going to sit top into zone 2, maybe a bit into their tempo sort of range. Same as what you do for a 70.3. You're going to sit upper of zone 2, bottom of zone 3. So by doing this stuff at sort of threshold, we lift the intensity a bit, means we don't have to do as much volume. It's like what we were talking about before with the VO2 stuff. We do 30-second efforts compared to 4-minute efforts. You lift the intensity, but we don't have to do as much working time. We've only got 10 minutes working time as opposed to 20. So it then becomes a case of, all right, well, if we're talking about 2/3 the distance is what we have to accumulate, we've now kind of blown that out of the water with the fact that, well, if I just go harder for a shorter period of time and have a short recovery, I can make up a decent amount of tolerance. But if I go slower and have maybe short recovery as well, I can also build up a bit of tolerance. But which one is then going to be more specific to what the athlete needs? And then also based on the race. So if you're going and doing Ironman, well, maybe doing the more tempo-y type runs where you're doing maybe a 30-minute piece, 15-minute recovery, like jogging or float type recovery, and then 30 minutes on again is going to be more specific for Ironman because it's longer, but you're also sitting tempo a little bit lower anyway. If we're looking at a half marathon, you want to be doing some efforts up at threshold, so that sub-threshold stuff makes a lot more sense on race day and it's a lot more comfortable. So that's how we then sort of adjust it. Like I said, it's a difficult one to be like, here's the textbook answer and that's what everyone does, because there's so many different paths to get to the same point. And like I said, it's almost better when it's open because you can start to see what works, what doesn't. Some things that like guys have done that I'm not going to necessarily say it's scientifically proven to work, but it has worked, is like for a sprint distance triathlon or Olympic distance triathlon, we've had guys go and do, like, one session was we're doing 1K repeats with him, and instead of doing 5 1K repeats, we did, what was it? I'm trying to think of the race now. Might have been, I think it was a sprint, but instead of doing like 5 1K repeats, I think we did like 6 or 7 because the actual race, it was a weird like 7.5K run. It was a strange distance. And so we did 7 1K repeats at threshold or 105% of threshold, because what we wanted him to do is be able to really tolerate as high a possible pace as you could 1K repeats again and again and again. But the race distance was 7Ks or 7.5Ks, so hence why we did 7. There was no science behind it. We just kind of went, how much do we have to run? How much can you tolerate in that session? In the case of 7Ks, you could probably tolerate that in a single session. If we're doing 42Ks in a marathon, different story. You're not going to want to go out and do 42Ks of threshold work. So maybe the 2/3 is a bit closer benchmark, but I wouldn't necessarily be fixated on doing the maths of what's going to be better than what, because 3K efforts, 4K efforts, 5K efforts, 6K efforts, you could do any of them because your pace is going to adjust accordingly. There's no way you're going to be able to go out and hold, if you do 5K repeats, as in like 5 kilometers on, recover, 5 kilometers on, you're not going to be able to hold the same intensity as if you did 3K repeats.
No, correct.
So this is where it's like, well, how do I want to benefit from this session? Do I want to am I getting a plateau somewhere? If you're getting a plateau in those 5K repeat sessions, all right, maybe try some 3K repeats instead and lift the pace. Might give yourself the same work to rest ratio, so 3 to 1 or 2 to 1, whatever it may be. Let's say it's like 12 minutes on, 6 minutes off, or you might do 12 minutes on, 4 minutes off, whatever you can handle. But because you're doing a 3K piece, you can lift the intensity. That's going to give you a bit better tolerance because you're working a bit harder in that period. It's going to inevitably have a little bit more fatigue in the legs in that period. Go the longer side of things, you're going to have to naturally drop the pace. So, like I said, there's no real hard, fast rule. It's the type of thing I always kind of like to joke about that. If we're talking race specific stuff, the really specific stuff is just going and racing. I mean, you could go and just race and race and race, and you get race fit extremely quickly. It's ridiculous. Like there's a bunch of guys. Like one of the guys that Luke used to coach was he gun triathlete. He still is. Broke 4 hours at Geelong. he used to, for one or two seasons, he was just going, all his bike training would be like, he'd go out and do his Zone 2 ride, but then he'd go and just race crits like 3 times a week.
Yeah, right.
Because it's an hour of threshold on the limit, and his cycling was just ridiculous because he could just tolerate the living daylights out of it. Racing is the most specific. Outside of that, then it's a case of, right, we just need to do something that's going to push us reasonably hard for a period, and then like a 6, 7 out of 10, and then get a short recovery. So then we have to struggle through the next one. That's what you really have to do.
Gotcha.
How you make that up, basically do whatever you like, really.
Right. So don't get too hung up on that. Really, just progressively overload the body, teach it to tolerate more, push the limits out.
Pretty much. And then it's just, like I said, it just comes down to a case of like, what's the specificity behind you trying to push the body? Like, if we're trying to push the body from an Ironman perspective, well, pushing the body is going to look very different. It might be a case of, all right, I'm going to go out and do a big bike session on the Saturday, do a run off the bike for 45 minutes. Sunday morning, get up, big hour 45 run first thing in the morning, sort of mid to upper Zone 2 to really stress it. And then finish the weekend. You're going to come back Sunday afternoon at 5 o'clock. The last thing you want to do on the weekend is run again, but you come back and do half an hour at sort of mid Zone 2, because that's going to stress the body as if you're in a race where you've gone from 6 in the morning, you're finishing at 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, whatever it happens to be. Yeah. And you have to just keep running. It's just one foot in front of the other. We don't really care almost how quick you're going at that point. It's I'm getting to the finish. Compared to a half marathon where it's like, all right, we're just doing a fresh half marathon. Let's go out and do some really high intense quality efforts, because that's going to help lift the pace. Yeah. You don't want to get stuck running a half marathon at your marathon pace. You want to be running significant way quicker. And if anything, let's try and go a little bit faster than that again. So we want to be going at and well above race intensity to get the speed into legs.
Gotcha.
It's the type of thing you look at some of the old school coaches that, I mean, some of the principles that they're using aren't any different. They're just doing it a different way. Like we don't necessarily go and prescribe, we're going to go to the track and do 400s. We might be a bit more strict on, all right, we're going to use times and pacing and heart rates and things like that. But that's their version of their speed work, if you want to call it. They might go and do 400s or 800s. When you think about it, though, what are they doing in an 800, like an 800-meter effort, or the old 1K repeat session, which we use a bit anyway, but an 800 session, they're probably having a short recovery. It might be 800 on, 60, 90 seconds off. It's like, well, all right, you have a 2 to 1, 3 to 1 weeks rest. You've worked pretty much at threshold or maybe just above threshold. That's all you need to be able to get that tolerance in the legs. But because you've done 800, you're able to hold 105, 110% of threshold. They go out and do a 15-minute effort. They're not holding that same pace. They're holding sub-threshold. And then you go a bit longer again, you hold more of a tempo. It just then provides a very different way of then tolerating. So it comes back to that whole like muscular endurance. It's like, well, what do you need? Do we need more tempo middle of Zone 3, or do we need more Zone 3, upper Zone 3, maybe just above threshold? Just picking and then you can mix them. Like it's not the type of thing that, all right, I'm racing here, so I have to use the bottom end of Zone 3 in all my intensity sessions. It's like, well, you can use some of that higher stuff because that's going to help. Or if you're racing up here, you can use some of the lower stuff because that is also going to help as well. Zone 3 is kind of a do as you like, almost, with a bit of structure. But
there's probably an argument for Ironman running that you're that fatigued by the time you get to the run that you literally just need endurance in your legs to get through it. I mean, it's
apart from the pros, you're going to be pretty much running a Zone 2 run anyway. So it's at that point, it's like go out and do a Zone 2 run.
Just go run specific for as long as you can.
Pretty much.
So I think even in a half too. So my recent experience tells me that you probably start out at that pace, and but after a while of cramping, dehydration, all that sort of stuff kicks in, then ultimately you just need the endurance in your legs to get home. So I suppose best endeavours to hold the pace, but ultimately it's an endurance base. So,
and that's the type of thing. If we're looking at like a 70.3 and cramping, other than dehydration and any causes from there, it's a case of, well, if you don't have the muscular endurance in your legs, that's also one of the causes of potential cramping. So if you go out and go, I'm going to hold 4-minute K pace on my run at 70.3, but your body can only handle 4:15s, very quickly you are going to start to blow up, and your body's way of telling you to stop essentially and recover is to just stop processing. So
yes, I know that all too well.
If that's going to be a cause of cramping, calves seize up. It's like, well, if my calves are seizing up, it's my body telling me do not do any more work. I need to stop and recover because I've gone too hard. It's a really easy one that a lot of people go, oh, is it something to do with my sodium? Is it something to do with hydration? Things like that. Maybe. Did you overexert though? Quite often you can tick that box and be like, if we've overexerted based on how we trained, yeah, absolutely. And this is, again, coming back to that zone 2 conversation we had before. If you've practiced going upper zone 2 and on a 70.3, you want to race a bit more of that sort of, I guess, tempo, if you like, just above zone 2 by the time you get to the run. Well, let's practice top of zone 2 in a bit from our running, but also let's do a bit of that sort of tempo, more of that tempo stuff than maybe what we've done previously, because that's going to help us sort of just harden the legs. It's just specificity, really. It's very basic principle of training. There's nothing fancy scientific about it in terms of what it is. Principles of training, specificity, overload, frequency, variety, all these factors, intensity, all these factors have stood true for decades. I mean, nothing's really changed revolutionary out of it. And that's why I say there's often a bit of disconnect between sort of old school, new school, if you want to call it that. But I mean, the principles governing it all is pretty similar. It's just then how you get to the end goal.
Yeah.
Making slightly different paths.
Yeah. And our ability to actually measure physiologically what's going on, power meters and all that sort of stuff made it a bit more scientific.
Benefit of new technology and new ways of looking at things. But then also, I mean, it's a classic case of hindsight's 2020. You should look at some of the stuff that they were doing in the 80s and the 70s and the 60s even. It's just like, compared to what people think of training now and high performance, it's almost polar opposites. Just because we've got the ability to look back and be like, well, what they were doing in the 60s probably wasn't really right. Let's do a little bit better. At the time, they didn't have. It's the same now. Like if we do something now that we go, yeah, this is amazing. 15 years time, we might be completely wrong because there's a better way of doing it. A 2 to 4 minute efforts for VO2, the best. Is it actually 3.5 minute effort is the ideal that we want to be working to? How fine tuned can we get it? Well, there's probably scope to move that, but we don't have the research or the technology to be able to understand it just yet. So there's always that next little bit of we can always sort of tweak it, but it's the type of thing that, like I said, I wouldn't get hung up on those dead principles. There's always flexibility and stuff. It's just how you then apply, like I said, the basics of training: specificity, progressive overload, intensity, volume, etc. And specificity being the key one.
Yeah, awesome.
As specific as you can, the better.
Yeah, awesome.